What is Kiva? I can describe Kiva in 5 minutes, but I'm going to talk to you for about an hour. Because I really, really want you to understand what Kiva is. So I'm going to backtrack quite a lot. And I'm going to address another word. And that is the word human. It is a word that describes a very special creature. A creature that is a combination of spirit and flesh. The word human says it all. Hu, man. Hu is derived from the scientific world called light. A hue is an element of light, like the hue that is sort of greenish, yellowish, whitish. Well, white isn't really a hue, it's all the hues combined, but the hue is an element of light. So when you talk about a human, you're talking about something that has an aspect of light to it. That aspect was derived from the fact that at one time or other, somebody noticed that out of this creature, there was an emittance of something they could only perceive as light. And so they gave it that aspect. They called it the hue, the person's hue. And so every human has a hue. Some have a sort of a yellowish hue, some have a pinkish hue, some have a greenish hue, and then the ones that are way out there supposedly have a kind of a bluish hue. But nonetheless, they all have a hue. And that emanates from what? It emanates not from the physical, it emanates from another aspect of the human, and that is its spiritual aspect. So every human has a spiritual component. But also, every human has a man component. Now, man is a root word that is used for manual, meaning mechanical or done by a person. It also is a root in the word material, so it is the physical aspect of things. So that word human very clearly indicates that everyone who is a human has both aspects in them. They have a spiritual aspect, which can be seen as their light, and it also has their material aspect, which can be seen as their physical selves, or maybe I can even say their shadow. because only the material casts a shadow. The spirit casts no shadow. Light casts no shadows. Because a human is composed of both of these elements, it is a unique creature. A real human, a complete human, is aware, continually aware, that they have both of these aspects within them. That is the real challenge of life. To be continually aware of the fact that you are human. In this culture, the materialistic culture we live in, with all of its emphasis on the material aspects, forces the humans to be constantly aware of their material selves. So they are constantly aware of their thirst, their hunger, their lusts, their envies, their angers, their greeds, and all of these physical aspects, because it's just the culture that the humans in this time period live in. But that is not a balanced human. Because it temporarily, or if it goes on long enough, it permanently causes a forgetfulness of the hue aspect. And that's not balanced. You are not a human if you are only catering to and are aware of your material man aspects. If you are only concerned with your hunger and your thirst and your well-being, physical well-being, you are not really a human. You are a man. That is all, just a man, but not a human. Eastern religion brought a concept to this culture where it tried to awaken the Western culture into a reawakening of the hue aspect of the human. And they brought these techniques like meditation and chanting and yoga and all the other techniques, mindfulness, all these other techniques to try and bring a reawakening of the hue to the human, especially in the West, because the human in the West was very, very man, not so much hue. But it too had a flaw. In the pursuit of this elusive awareness of hueness, of the spiritual aspect, it was too easy, or it was too tempting to forget. No, not forget, because the culture would not let you forget. It was too easy for you to try and deny your man and put a lot of emphasis on trying to attain the highest level of hue awareness that you can. And so you became so hue that you stopped living in the material world. And you sat in a cave and you went, and you perceived all the fourth dimensional beings and the fifth dimensional beings and the cosmic light, and your body did absolutely nothing. And you interacted with your brothers and sisters, nada, nothing. You had no social life. You did not attend to your manness. So you get too far into your humaness, and you are not a human. The human is that wonderful, wonderful space where you are simultaneously aware of your humaness, even in your madness. And so when things are going really, really bad and they step on your foot and I feel so lousy. Wow, it's rough having a body. Huh? Rough having a body. But you are aware of your other aspect. Oh man, I mean, the really bad day, I'm so sad. It's like, wow, I'm so sad, but I remember I am having a bad day. The hue in me is having, or the hue in me is witnessing the madness of me having a bad day. But I don't try to stop it. In other words, I don't try to ignore my madness. Actually, I go out and try to do some man stuff. Actually, hey, let's go out dancing. Let's do something. Let's do something physical. But always with the awareness that there is a hueness to me. So I don't get lost in my manness. I only am simultaneously relishing it. And I am glad that I have had in this wonderful 100-year experience of being a human. Because it's very rare. It's actually, if you think about it, it's like really, really special. Because for instance, for 10,000 years, you were a spirit before you came into this body. And you're only in this body for 100 years, and then for 10,000 years more, you're going to be a spirit again. It's like, whoa! 100, 10,000, 10,000, or maybe even longer, infinity, 100, infinity. Whoa! That's a really narrow slice where I am having the opportunity to have a man aspect. The trick, of course, is not to get lost in it, only to relish it. And it's tricky, especially if you live in a culture that puts a whole lot of emphasis on that man aspect. But it makes sense. It makes sense to not deny your physical self, because it's a very, very short slice of your total existence. I mean, you're infinite. What the heck? And for a lousy 100 years, you have a chance to touch somebody or to feel the air and enjoy the freshness of the aromas and hear things like music and the laughter and all of this. Very, very narrow window. So it must be enjoyed to be a human, to come into a body and then spend 15, 20 years trying to get into that infinite space again, and then waste the last 60 years back in the infinite. It's too much. It's too much of a waste. Because, that means you only had 20 years or whatever it took you to get to that space to enjoy the duality of being a spirit in a material shell, in a material body. So don't waste it. But don't don't goof it up either. Don't squander it in just dealing with your material aspect. Now I'll talk about Kiva. Because we live in a society that constantly reminds us of our physical self, it's so easy to get lost in it. So what we need is a mechanism, a way to step back into our hue cells for a period of time to reconnect, to dive deep into our hueness so that we can touch that aspect in a very, very strong and powerful way. Just like we have very strong and powerful experiences of our physical existence, we need strong and powerful experiences of our spiritual existence. And that's what Kiva is for. Kiva is not a place, really. I know it's the name that was given to a circular space where people come together to reconnect with their spiritual selves. In Kiva, you sing, you dance, you pray, you chant, you reconnect, you do whatever it is that you need to do to touch in a very deep and powerful way that hue within you. So that way, when you come out of Kiva, you can remember for that period of time, you can remember like that there is a hue within you, and you can go into your material world with a remembering, like, oh yeah, I can't get lost in this because, Kiva reminds me. And so it's like that wonderful thing we used to do a long time ago when we didn't have synthetic dyes. When we didn't have synthetic dyes, we used plant dyes. And so we'd take a plant that was the right color, like the fruit of that cactus, the red stuff, and we'd put it in a bowl, add water, and it'd all red like that. And we'd take a piece of cloth, and we wanted to make red, and we'd dip it in the red juice, and we'd pull it out, and it was red for a while, and then we'd hang it up in the sun to dry, and then the sun would come in, and it would fade it. And it was now sort of pinkish or whatever. But then we'd take it off the line, put it back in the red juice, and hang it up, and it'd fade a little bit, but not as much as before. It was now a little redder because there was more dye in it. And then it was dry, and we put it back in, and I keep doing this. And pretty soon we hang it up, the sun hits it, it's dry, boom, it's red. I mean, it's really, really red. Now this is what can happen with a human being. Right now, if you are materially in the material world, you are like that cloth that doesn't have awareness of its color, of its hueness. So what we do is we dip you into the Kiva and let the spiritual awareness come into you, and so you get a little bit of spiritual awareness in Kiva. And then you come out of Kiva and you've got a little bit of color in you, you've got your hueness up, and then you go out into the world and it fades because the material world is saying, bye! All is brown, and so it fades. So we take you and we dip you back into the Kiva, and you reconnect with your hueness, and you come back out. And you know what? Pretty soon you don't fade as much. And one day you come out of the Kiva and the world's saying, bye! And you're like, buy my butt. It's like, yeah, okay, yeah, I'm hungry, I'll buy. But you know what? There's no fade. You have made it. You have remembered that you are a spirit living in a material body simultaneously. You have reached this special balance, but you need to have that instrument. Now, Kiva isn't the only instrument. It's just the one that I use. I mean, You can dip yourself back into that hueness by on your own, sitting early in the morning, quietly in your room and chanting Om or whatever, or saying your prayers or whatever it is that you are remembering stuff, whatever it takes to dip back into that space, and then you go out into the world and then like that. And so you keep doing this. But whatever it is that does it for you, that is what you have to keep doing until you are a true, balanced human. Because that's the aim. That's the aim of Kiva. The aim of Kiva is to gather and create balanced humans and keep them in that space. And anything else that does that, well, I guess you could call that Kiva too. But Kiva was an old Pueblo technique. The Pueblo natives of this region, they built these spaces underground where the people would come in, and the old ones, the ones that were balanced already, the ones that had made all the necessary connections with both their physical aspects and their spiritual aspects, would talk and teach, or maybe even just work with people, or maybe chant, or whatever was necessary to reconnect everybody in the group with that aspect. And sometimes they would even remind people of their material selves, because sometimes even in the material world, even in the world of society, you have to be taught how to be a good man. Or, as Tori would say, a good woman too. She hates me whenever I do this man thing. She says, "Oh, this is a man. Why don't you ever say woman?" I'm like, well, I'm old school. Back in the day, man meant human, and it's like, okay, I'm not being discriminatory. It's like, this is not just for the males of the group. When I say human, I also mean human. And but even man needs to know how to live in a nice, orderly, balanced way, so that there is more peace. Because you could be a human even in chaos. You could walk out that door and there's a riot going on, and there's just all sorts of nastiness going on, and you could still be a human. You could still be aware of your spiritual aspect and saying to yourself, "Wow, boy, I'll be glad when that's all done," and deal with it, because you have your internal awareness of your spiritual self. But why? If you have learned how to live in a good, harmonious way through the meetings that you have with the rest of your society, you can live in some kind of a harmony and some kind of a balance, and it makes the man aspect of your life just a little bit more pleasant. So it's good to have Kiva meetings like this. This is not really a Kiva meeting in the classic sense, because actually it really is, now that I'm reflecting on it, because only this Kiva is talking about more of the man aspect of being a human. The Kiva that I conduct on Fridays, it dives deep into the humanness of things, because, well, that's where the most imbalance is. That's where the weakness is. But still yet, there is something to be said about living in a harmonious, balanced way, and teaching harmonious, balanced things to people, especially young people, who are still trying to find their place in the order of things. And they're looking for, well, gee, how should I react to that situation, or what is the right way to do this, and how should I treat my boyfriend, or how should I treat my girlfriend? What is the proper way to talk to an elder? What is the proper way to talk to a child? And questions like that can be answered too if they come up. Although, like I said, in today's society, the real weakness, the thing that needs to be addressed most, is the shortcomings in the hue aspect of the human. There are too many humans out there that are just, for all practical purposes, just man. They're just man. They only concerned with their material world and their material needs and the material aspects of life, and so they act very, very brutish. I mean, because the physical is a brute on some level. It gets hungry, and when it gets hungry, it tries to feed, and it doesn't get too fussy about it. It's just like the spiritual aspect is almost, oh, wait a minute, you got to be in balance here. Let's be in balance about this thing. So that's the weakness, and that is what Kiva has been addressing now for 24 years. The Kiva I started in Albuquerque has been addressing the hue aspect of the human now for 24 years and giving people a chance to connect with their hueness in a very, very deep and profound way. And maybe later on, when things start getting a little bit better, and I'm no longer here, but some of you younger people are here, and you're holding Kiva, you'll be talking about some of the other aspects. You'll be talking about society and the kind of world you want to live in, and how you want to live, and some of the characteristics of the society that you'll be living in. But to get you there, the primary purpose of Kiva right now is to get you to be aware of your fullness, the fullness of your existence as a human being. And that's what Kiva is. And I guess, are there any questions?
How long does the ceremony last, or the Kiva?
That's the scary part. Because it depends. If it's just me, and it's been that way, every once in a while people just don't show up. If it's just me, it only lasts about an hour and a half. However, if it's everybody in this room, then it lasts 4 hours, 5 hours, or whatever. Because each one of you has to get in touch with your hue self, and you will be given the place and the space to do that. Now, it takes me about an hour and a half when I'm alone to get into my hueness, but that's simply because actually I don't just dip my toes into it. I mean, I jump in and I do the backstroke and I do the front stroke, and then I do a deep soak and all that, because I'm always by myself. So I go in deep, and so I stay in my hueness for an hour and a half. Now, if you were at Kiva with me and there's 5 or 6 of you, I'm only going to go in for a few minutes, because I mean, the last thing you want to do is just wait for me to finish doing my dip, and then there's no time for you. So what I'll do is I will, for like a few minutes, just kind of go in and do it, and connect, and then I say, okay, I'm done, and it's Peter's turn, and so he goes deep into the and then pretty soon he says, okay, I'm done, and it goes like that. It goes around. And you get to do whatever it takes I mean, with guidance, of course. You know, I don't just throw you to the wolves and say, all right, find your humus, you know, go in there, dive. I'll give you some guidance so that, you know, you can get there. But yeah, in the early days, you go in and you do a quick dive and you come out real quick and you're like, wow, that's okay, I'm done. And it goes around like that because that's the way it is. But yeah, later on, you know, you can find that you can go in and you can just have a deep soak. And you don't have to. Actually, like I said, it's like the dipping of the cloth at some point. You know, once it's red, you know, you just want to give it a quick fresher upper so it's nice and bright red all the time. Just give it a quick thing like that. But it's the hue aspect of a human being is kind of, it's got its value too. I mean, to have a really deep soak into it is so rewarding. It has, what is it? The yogis, they talk about it as bliss. It's perfect bliss. And, you know, they talk about it as being perfect bliss. And I guess it's one of the reasons why they actually sometimes get addicted to it and they'll go in there and stay and not come back out. Because it is kind of neat. It's pretty darn addictive. It's better than anything you've ever or could ever do, because it's like it's a quick dive back into the infinite, and especially if you've been living in the material world too long and you're like, what the heck, out of there. But don't do it. Don't do it. The real world, the real human being enjoys the material world too, even when it hurts. It's like, wow, that really hurt good. Whatever, something to that effect, you know. It's like, or it felt good. So that is being a true human being, and once again, that is the purpose of Kiva, to create real human beings. Yeah.
What's the difference between the Kiva and the sweat lodge?
The difference between the Kiva and the sweat lodge. Now, this is one of those kind of techniques. Sweat lodge is a technique. There are some men's, women's, so hard-boiled in the material world. They are so deep into the material world. Even if I took them to Kiva, all they would hear is the song on a physical level. All they would smell is the incense in the room on a physical level. And they would not really connect with their hue. It would just be another interesting physical experience. But we've got a fix for those. What we do is we put them in the sweat lodge. The sweat lodge is a dark, very hot space. Extremely uncomfortable. Temperature 160 degrees minimum. That's for the beginners. That's for, you know, if you're just kind of bringing them up. 160 degrees. I mean, you can, if you went into a sweat lodge with dough in your lap, you could walk out with bread. Okay? A very, very harsh place to be. Your body cries to get out of there. Let me out! I'm dying here! I can't breathe! Oh, my skin feels like it's on fire! Oh my God, that steam when it hits me, it causes blisters! Oh dear, I'm dying here! Yes, you are. You are physically dying in there. Why am I killing you? Why am I killing you? Because what I want you to do is I want you to leave. I want you to leave your body. I'm not going to let you out the door. So the only way out of that lodge is, the only way out is in. The only way out of that lodge is to go into a space that is not connected to your body, where you are disconnect from your body. You are forced under extreme pain to leave your body and find your spiritual self. Because when you check out of your body, you reconnect with your spirit. But it's the only way I could get you there. Actually, there are other ways, but that's the way we do it here. I mean, there are other ways. Like if you went to a Sioux medicine man, he would poke sticks in your chest and hang you from a tree in the sun for 4 days, and until the flesh broke off of your chest. And the pain would be unbearable because you're hanging from a tree, and you got skewers in your flesh, and the sun is beating down on you for 4 days, and you don't drink any water, and you're thirsty, and you're in pain, and the sun is, and like that, and so you leave. Again, you leave. Okay? Another technique, but it's the same technique. Create so much stress for the body that you connect with your spirit. Okay, now after you've gone into the sweat lodge and I've pretty much jammed you into your spirit self, now that I take you into the Kiva and I say, okay, remember that wonderful self that you connected with, your spirit self? Okay, let's reconnect with that and let's dance it, sing it, let it come out and play. But if you have never connected with that, the sweat lodge is how I connect you. Now, there's another technique, and not so big, was not so big here. It's getting more and more popular. And I'm not a big fan of it, but it's another technique. There are these plants that you can take, and they weird you out so bad that once again you have no choice but to connect with that infinite aspect of yourself. And you do. And then you come back and you say, hey, wow, I connected with an aspect of myself I didn't even know existed. And so then that's good. Once you've done that, good. Come back into the Kiva, and now let's dance and sing that beautiful aspect that you discovered, and let's exercise it. Let's exercise it regularly so that you can keep doing that kind of in and out until you can become a balanced human being. Now, one of the reasons I don't push what they call the shortcut, the method of using the powerful plants or chemicals, is what I have found is even though it is extremely effective, it damages you. A psychotropic does in fact rearrange your mind. And if it is a very powerful psychotropic, it rearranges your mind so much that even though you come back into your quote-unquote physical self, the physical self you come back into is not the same. It has been altered by the chemistry of this. New synapses have been created in the brain. New connections have been organized. Other connections have been severed. You don't quite come back the same. Yes, you're a human. You're a human when you come back, because now you are aware of your spiritual self, and of course you come back into your physical self. But you're not the same human. You're not the same human that left. There is a profound psychological change that happens. And actually the psychological change is caused by the physiological change that was created by the chemistry of the substance that you ingested. So you are not the same human on either the physical or the psychological level. You're a whole different being. Now, some people might say, well, that's a good thing. And I suppose it has its value. Let's say you were an addict. You were a serious drug addict. And you take these medicines and they totally rearrange you and you come back. Or something comes back. And of course it doesn't think drugs are all that interesting anymore. And it's no longer an addict. That creature is no longer an addict. But it's that creature because it's not the person that went in. This is a different person. Probably has a different personality. Has a different, well, obviously it's a different personality. It's not addicted anymore. It's not an addict. So there is already a profound change. So what happens is you have a new creature in an old set of memories and circumstances. But it's not the same. It's not the same. It is a different character. And if you do this enough times, I mean, if you do this many, many times, you can get so twisted. Because every time you do this, it changes you a little bit. But if you do it hundreds of times, you come back so twisted, or you get so twisted, you're not even a normal man. You're still a human because, of course, you've got your spiritual, physical, but you are so twisted by the changes in your psychology, the changes in your neuromuscular system, that you are pretty darn weird. Now, that doesn't mean you're not a human. You're a weird human. And I suppose you still qualify as a human, and you can have a darn good time, but people are going to look at you a little strange because you have a propensity to dye your hair blue and wear strange clothes or none or whatever, and because that's the psychology of what, this is what happened when these chemicals rearrange the functions within of that body. And so it's a different body. And so it's not the same. That's why I'm not real big on that. If you are going to use the shortcut route, I recommend you do it quickly and for a very short period of time so you don't get too weird. Don't get too weird. Yes, it's a shortcut. It's good. But the minute you make the connection with that spiritual aspect of yourself, done. You're done. Now the challenge is to exercise it. Exercise that connection. Try to be the best human you can with the body that you now have. Try to turn that body into a nice become a nice human being with what you've got. And and don't let yourself get too weird, because one of the joys of being a human being is to be able to socialize, or to live in a social structure, to have friends, to have a family. And if you're so weird that nobody wants to talk to you because you are into talking to trees and rocks and some of the fourth dimensional creatures, you're not going to have too many friends, and you're not going to fit into society all that well. And so, that's the what is it called? The downside of the shortcut. But I'm not going to just say, oh, don't do it. Because, you know what? If I say don't do it, man, that's the first thing you'll do. It's just that's just the first thing you'll do. Try, staying in the sweat lodge. Okay? Say to the body, I am in control here. You are not leaving this hot, terrible place because I'm keeping you here. I and the Spirit am in control. You are not in control, body. You can cry and you can weep and you can, howl or whatever you're going to do, but you are not in control. I am in control today, and I am making my presence known. I am the boss today. Of course, you don't want to stay in that condition either. Like I said, that's going too huge. And you come out of the sweat lodge and say, oh, that was pretty good. My spirit is strong. My body, look at it, it's all burnt up, and I've got blisters on my shoulders from the steam, and I'm sweating like there's no tomorrow, and my God, I really need to dip into some cold water right now because I'm way overheated. But my spirit was in control, and I got to see that. I got to experience my spirit in its full potential, and I know that I have a spiritual aspect to myself. And that is the difference between the Kiva and the sweat lodge.
My body what?
Since you're posting this on YouTube, I was thinking, this is about Kiva, but so you're also talking about, the human and there's different ways to pursue that balance. Can you talk a little bit about discernment in terms of where you go to, I've gone to your Kiva just a couple of times, and I've always felt very safe there, and like you were in, you know what I mean? I felt it was a good place, it felt safe. And fortunately, haven't had any negative experiences. But I remember, in the past, someone talking about that, and I just feel like I've been fortunate, but what advice would you give as to, how to exercise discernment? Because I know that, I believe that it's possible if, basically, you go somewhere and perhaps, for whatever reason, that people could get in touch with things that really they probably shouldn't, or you know what I mean? I feel like sometimes whomever is leading the ceremony, if they're sort of not a master at it, that they could possibly stir up things that, I don't know if that makes sense.
It is possible in a unstructured Kiva situation that a person could make connections with not so pleasant aspects of the spiritual world. That is possible in and out of Kiva. It's more possible out of Kiva than it is in Kiva. In Kiva, you have the guidance, in a good Kiva, you'd have the guidance of people who have connected with the more positive aspects of the spiritual world and hold that space. And so in that space, they would be, as you said, safe and able to communicate with the more positive, beneficial aspects of the spiritual world. Now, if somebody who just connected to the spiritual world either by one of the shortcut methods. This is another danger of the shortcut method, because every once in a while somebody will just take the shortcut on their own without guidance, without direction, and make connection with the spirit world without guidance and direction, and connect with a darker aspect of the spirit world, and then suddenly decide, hey, I need to share this with all my friends. I'm going to call all my friends, and we're going to sit together, and we're going to all do a meeting, and we're going to call it Kiva, and I'm going to invite all my newfound friends in there, and I don't mean just a physical friend, they're newfound spiritual friends, and so then everybody has a jolly bad time. That can happen. Because of, and that is, again, one of the downsides of the shortcut method, because somebody can make a shortcut connection to the other side and connect to the other aspects, because, and I'm glad you touched on that, and I have to kind of cover that too. The spirit world isn't all bliss and beauty. Wherever there is light, there is shadow. Okay? That's just the nature of the creation. The Creator created the world in such a way that everything has the other side. Okay? There's this side and this side. So if you have a light, you have a dark. With light, shadow. Heads, tails. Masculine, feminine. There is two sides to everything. And the spirit world is no different. There are some spiritual entities so foul, so nasty and obnoxious, that when I was being trained as a medicine man, one of the first lessons that I was taught was how to defend myself and others from that. That was one of the first lessons. Why would that be one of the first lessons? It's because it's real. And if you put yourself in a situation where you're trying to do good, if you're trying to be positive, you will most likely attract that other aspect. Because the brighter the light, the darker the shadow. And that's just the way it is. So, Kiva, real Kiva, is a space where people come together under the guidance and direction, or in the company of light-oriented people. Now, that doesn't mean that there are not Kivas that have dedicated their attention to the other side, because, in fact, if you poke around hard enough, you will find a dark Kiva. Back in the early days of my being a shaman, I was convinced that it was my job to be the psychic police. And I would seek out these negative groups and bust them. I would just fight, because I could, somebody's having a meeting right about, and I'd get in my car, and then I'd open the door to their thing and just say, hey, what are you doing? Cut it off! And then they're just totally freaked out. And that was all that I just knew. It was like, oh my God, there's a psychic police. But then that faded. I was told to to cool that. You know, it's like actually that was kind of immature. But I was immature. I was young. I was in my 20s, I was in my late 20s, and so I still had that kind of, I'm the medicine man around here. Yeah. I'm going to clean up this town. But now I realize, no, it was like, that was just wrong. And it's like, let those people be. Let them, leave them the heck alone. It's like you can't eradicate them, you just go over there and all you do is just probably make them crankier, or send them deeper underground or whatever, happens. And so that got terminated. And so anyway, that's a valid point. If you find yourself in a quote unquote space like that, just leave. Just leave. And you can feel it. You'll know when you're in a nice, resonant space. You'll be comfortable. You'll be relaxed. You'll be at peace, and you'll have that feeling of I'm safe and I'm home. But if you feel something is not quite right, it isn't. It probably isn't. And don't force yourself to stay there. The only time you force yourself to stay there is in Sweat Lodge. I don't want you bolting out of Sweat Lodge. So I want you to stay in there and suffer. No, that's not it either. No, I want you to stay in there and find your higher self. And you know what? And it's okay to bolt. I've never really made anybody stay in there. I mean, I gotta go. Okay, open the door. Yeah. But afterwards I say, you know what? The whole purpose of this is for you to be able to tough it out. I'm giving them the whole, next time get it, suffer harder. Get past that, get past that, paying attention to your body. That thing is leading you down a bad path. Tell it who's the boss. So, but that's it. In another situation, like you're in a group or something like that, and you're supposed to be fighting your higher aspect and you're uncomfortable, get out of there. It's not right. So, what else can I touch on?
Preparing yourself to go in to Kiva or Sweat?
Both of those, yes, prepare yourself. Always prepare yourself. Know what it is you want out of that experience. Know what it is you want. And, Sweat Lodge, what you want out of Sweat Lodge, should you be a newbie and you feel you've never really connected with that spiritual aspect of yourself, you expect that you want to make that connection. Okay. Now, if you're not a newbie, now here's an interesting thing. A lot of the old guys, even me, I go into a Sweat Lodge and I suffer just as much as the newbies. I mean, it's not a pleasant place. It's an extremely harsh environment. It's hard to breathe. It's extremely uncomfortable. But Sweat Lodge has a beautiful physical positive aspect. All that sweating, it actually releases all of the water-soluble toxins that you've taken in the course of your life. So it's a physical cleansing. So now you're not in there for the spiritual connection because you've already been there, done that, and it's like that. But now you're in there to kind of let as much of that water-soluble toxins to go out.